You're watching the Slice Tower Hamlets election coverage ahead of the general election on the 4th of July. Natalie Bianfei is the Green Party candidate standing in Poplar and Limehouse. She is also councillor representing Bow West, and she joins us now. Natalie Bianfei, you are the Green Party candidate standing for Poplar and Limehouse. Why are you standing for office, and what do you recognise to be the most pressing issues for local residents?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Imogen. Really nice to be here. So I'm standing for Poplar and Limehouse really to make sure that there is strong green representation on the ballot and that people can feel that they can vote green, whoever wants to. This is obviously not a target constituency for the Green Party, but nonetheless, we can see that the two main parties aren't being bold enough, aren't being radical enough about key issues which are really important to the constituents in Poplar and Limehouse. So at hustings and online, I'll be making the arguments to make sure, and in the press, to make sure that the two main parties are really taking the issues seriously that we think need to be taken seriously. So the three, I think, kind of categories of issues that are important for constituents in Poplar and Limehouse are housing, economy, cost of living, and the health service. So kind of running through all of those, obviously we are the Green Party as well. So climate as a thing that's coming down the track for us, and something that we think is already here, is a kind of common thread that runs through all of those.
And so you mention housing, and obviously your target audience does involve young people who are particularly worried about climate change, but they're also the generation most worried that they'll never be able to afford a home. What are you going to do for the younger residents in Poplar and Limehouse to ensure that they'll be able to continue affording to live here?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're beyond a housing crisis in Tower Hamlets. So as a councillor, I know that we have over 23,000 households on the social housing waiting list. It's, for children growing up in the borough and in the constituency, even having their own room is an aspiration, and I think that is an absolute tragedy, and we've walked into that. We knew, decades ago that we needed to build more family-sized homes for social rent, and those weren't being built for too long. So that's something that I'm really, really keen to push as a councillor, but also as a constituency candidate. So we also know that supply of family-sized homes has been reduced by the right to buy. So we are keen to have a policy of right to buy back, and support councils to buy back housing that has been sold off under right to buy. But at the same time, so that's I guess there are the three kind of segments of housing. So there's social housing, where we need more family-sized homes. There's privately rented, which in Tower Hamlets is about a third of the sector, and privately rented, a lot of those were bought under right to buy. So I'd be looking to support councils to provide them more funding to be able to buy back those houses. And then in the privately owned sector, I think we have quite a good supply of privately owned houses. A lot of the flats that are being built in the constituency are currently up. About 50% of them are up for private sale. But I think there are important things that we can do to allow. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to buy my own home, at least for the next 20 years. So supporting young people to buy, if that is something that they can afford to do. But I think focusing on these sectors which are really, really pinched, so the private rented sector and the social rented sector particularly, would be my priorities.
And how would you allow more young people to start privately renting when right now they can't afford it?
So yeah, I think there's a number of things that we need to look at. So for me, enforcement on this is, I mean, it's a kind of council thing, but enforcement on landlords, rogue landlords that um, don't have the right kind of you know yeah, that's I think so. Just, I guess, to reframe the question, I think the entering the market for privately rented people entering the market, the main barriers tend to be things like landlords not allowing families, landlords not having the right kind of things in place for like repairs, like getting repairs done. And then there are also rogue landlords who don't follow the HMO, so the houses under multiple occupancy legislation. So enforcing that better is a key thing. But I think the government can do more to put controls on the levels of rent. So that's something that as a Green Party, we've been calling for consistently. So there are measures. So there are things that need to be looked at before rent controls get brought in, to make sure that the housing supply doesn't collapse, which is the common criticism raised against rent controls. But the government has the power to implement rent controls, and it's something that I think is crazy that hasn't been done before. It's been done in many, many other countries. So, yeah.
As you say, there are kind of criticisms leveled against rent control, and we've seen in places like San Francisco, New York, Scotland, rent controls actually causing supply to decrease, maintenance decreasing, and it being harder forever for young people kind of entering the market to start renting. How would these negative consequences be avoided by the Green Party?
So the full manifesto is coming out in just a few days' time. So all of the details about that will be in the manifesto. The key thing is that any rent controls be brought in deep consultation with renters, and consultation with landlords. So whatever we do, we can't just copy paste something from San Francisco or from Scotland or from elsewhere. It has to be for the UK, or it has to be delegated down from the government to London Regional. So the London Mayor might be given those powers, and then that negotiation happens in London. But whatever happens, clearly the rental market is not working for many people in Poplar and Limehouse. And the important thing is that we rebalance that power relationship between renters and landlords, which has just not been looked at yet. So many MPs are landlords, and it has resulted in consistent policies that mean that renters are not in a position to claim their power. So for us, I think the important bit is to rebalance that.
So moving on from housing, you were voted recently as the lead on the Environment and Climate Emergency Scrutiny Committee in Tower Hamlets. What concerns you most about Lutfur Rahman's environmental policies?
So yes, so that's obviously that's part of my role as a councillor. So maybe not so relevant as in my role as a constituency candidate. So what concerns me most about what I will be looking at most in my role as a councillor, but also as my role as a person who is interested in the environment in Poplar and Limehouse. There are many things which we can do as individuals, but there are also things that we need to pressurise the national government to do, to look at systems change for how we reach our how we maintain responsibility for our the impact that we have on the climate. So I think the most important thing is to pressurise all governments or all administrations anywhere to uh, to recognise their responsibility, which the council has done. They declared a climate emergency, I think back in 2020, and there are big plans on reaching net zero, which are good to see. But we also need to get the basics right. So we have a very low recycling rate in Tower Hamlets. So that is something that I'm particularly concerned about. Lots of other residents particularly concerned about. So there are also things on reducing the impact of climate, the climate impact from our transport, the way that we get around, and things like how our houses are built, whether they're well insulated. So one of the key Green Party policies is to implement a home insulation program, street by street, and that would have a twin impact on the climate, the amount of carbon emissions that we're pumping out from our gas-fired boilers, and also a cost of living impact. So I think for constituents in Poplar and Limehouse, the key thing is that I will be pressurising the people in power to implement systems change, to make sure that the burden for change, because this will create, we do need to change, but I think the change that really needs to happen is on a systems level rather than on an individual level.
And you mention cost of living, which I think is a phrase that obviously means a lot to everyone locally, but also across the UK. The Green Party sees its role as pushing Labour to be bolder on the climate, but with tens of thousands using food banks every week in Tower Hamlets. Isn't it more important for those people that they vote for a party whose priority perhaps isn't the environment but is cost of living?
So I know I use the phrase cost of living, but we often describe the cost of living crisis as an inequality crisis as well. So I think the key, I guess I would say that the key argument from the Green Party is not that climate and that climate is a kind of it's an either or. Like either we save the environment or we try and make sure that everybody has what they need. I'm really interested in the ideas of someone called Kate Raworth, who developed an idea called donut economics, which is basically a graphic of an outer line of the planetary boundaries of where the line is for not overstepping what the planet can sustain, and then an inner line of human needs and wants, so housing, food, shelter, healthcare, and that is an inner line, and then we need to be existing between those two lines. So that is a framework which we follow as a Green Party through all of what we do. So people using food banks, people having to steal food. We've seen a huge rise in shoplifting. It's tragic. This is an absolute crisis. And when we have the top 1% of billionaires in this country not even paying the right amount of tax, this is such an injustice in our society, and the fact that there's been a kind of narrative created that we have to, we can't solve both of these problems at the same time, I think is just fallacy. So the home insulation program is just one example of how of a concrete policy of how we can actually solve both of these issues. So I would say that there doesn't it's maybe a crisis of imagination to say that there's a choice to be made here. I think if we think about this properly, then we can absolutely solve the inequality crisis as well as the climate crisis.
So we've spoken a bit about the economy, but also socially in Tower Hamlets. We've seen since October 7th, the Israel-Gaza war has been a particularly contentious topic in the borough, and is set to impact how local residents choose to vote on polling day. What is your stance on the ongoing conflict?
Yeah, I mean it's been a really really difficult time since the October the 7th. The the attack on Israel, but then the attack from Israel onto Hamas. We've seen such a huge tragic loss of life, and it's very very difficult to know how to respond appropriately. And I think there's been a huge amount of emotion in this time, and I've spent a lot of time with my residents, trying to support them. Um, our position in the Green Party has been from the beginning that there needs to be a political solution to this issue, that a military solution is absolutely not the way to go. So we have been the first party to call for a ceasefire. We've also called for the return of all of the hostages from both sides. And we've also called very strongly for the UK government to stop sending arms to Israel, which we fear. We are following the international legal position. So there has been an allegation of genocide that has not been proven yet, but we are supporting the legal process to make sure that we get an answer to what's actually happened. But it's really, really, really awful time, and I know that a lot of people in Tower Hamlets and across the borough are really, really rightly upset about what's happening.
And we've seen recently the Green Party has had to drop 4 candidates, including Elizabeth Waite, who was standing in Bethnal Green and Stepney due to anti-Semitic posts shared online. If elected, what are you going to do to ensure that Jews feel safe and represented by the Green Party?
So I would just counter that. So in Bethnal Green and Stepney, Elizabeth Waite had to step down. She felt that she has published a statement, which is available on our website to be able to so that you can read that. She erroneously shared a post from another source, which included an anti-Semitic trope. She worked very closely with the Jewish members in our local Green Party to talk through what the trope was. She was completely, really, really shocked and upset that she'd done this, and apologized immediately, deleted the posts immediately. But the press attention continued, and she felt that this issue had become a distraction from the national campaign. So she felt that she needed to step down, which we're really, really, really sad about. So for clarity, we did not ask her to step down. This was something that she decided to do. In terms of the national candidates, I'm afraid I don't know the details about why some candidates were asked to step down. It could, anti-Semitism is not something that we accept in the Green Party, and we're working very, very closely with our local Jewish members and Jewish Greens, which is a formal group within the Green Party, to make sure that all of our candidates understand the tropes, understand understand anti-Semitism. We're really, really taking this seriously. But in cases where things are a mistake or people don't understand, we are educating and making sure that everybody knows what can be offensive. So that is something that we're taking really seriously. But sadly, anti-Semitism does exist in society, and we are absolutely an anti-racist party, and we will do everything we can to make sure that that is not, we're working to dismantle racism in society.
And finally, Natalie, just to wrap things up on a slightly more light-hearted note, another way we can protect the environment is by going flight-free, which is a choice a lot of people take. So I'm asking you, where was the last place you went on holiday in the UK without using a plane that you'd like to share?
So I love going on holiday in the UK. I like going, it's called through hiking, and I'm just testing a new solar panel to take on my next walking trip. And I'll be going to the Hadrian's Wall, and I'll be walking along the Hadrian's Wall path in July, and I'm really looking forward to that after all the general election is over.
That sounds amazing. Thank you, Natalie Bianfe, Green Party candidate for Poplar and Limehouse.
Thank you so much for having me.